I first met Daniel when I was looking for a roommate to help cover rent in a small 2-bedroom apartment. Rent prices were high, and living alone wasn't an option. Daniel responded to my post, and during our first meeting, he seemed polite and approachable, with a friendly smile and a calm demeanor. I quickly felt comfortable with him, and we decided to move in together. In the beginning, everything was smooth. Daniel was neat, helpful, and even cooked meals occasionally. We both worked nearby. He had a bookstore and I had a coffee shop. Our evenings were spent watching movies or chatting about our days. We split expenses without any issues, and for a while, I thought I had lucked out with the perfect roommate. But gradually, things began to change. Daniel started coming home late, looking exhausted and distant. When I asked, he'd brush it off, claiming he was out with friends, though his tone felt off. I often heard him whispering on the phone late at night, his voice low and tense. Once, I overheard him mention something about risks and keeping things hidden. I tried to dismiss it as paranoia, but a growing unease settled in. One night, coming home late, I noticed the apartment was dark except for a faint light coming from Daniel's room. As I passed by, I heard soft sobs. Concerned, I knocked on his door. After a long pause, Daniel replied, sounding weary, claiming he was just tired. The abrupt silence that followed left me unnerved. Strange incidents piled up. I noticed stains on Daniel's clothes that he tried to conceal. Once, I found a small knife with dried blood on it in the bathroom. When I asked, Daniel laughed it off, saying he had accidentally cut himself while cooking. His casual dismissal only deepened my suspicion. Unable to shake the feeling of dread, I did something I never imagined. I searched his room when he was out. Hidden beneath clothes, I discovered a box containing newspaper clippings about unsolved murders, some with handwritten notes in the margins. There were also photos of victims and odd trinkets that sent a chill down my spine. Panicking, I fled the apartment and called the police. After inspecting the evidence, the officers advised me to stay somewhere safe. Days later, they informed me that Daniel had been arrested. He was caught attempting to dispose of items linked to another victim, and the evidence found in our apartment connected him to several murders. The realization that I had lived with a killer was paralyzing. Memories of Daniel's kindness clashed violently with the horrific truth. As I packed my things, I discovered a note from him in my room. "I'm sorry you found out this way. I never wanted to hurt you. You were the only real friend I had. Goodbye." I couldn't tell if it was genuine remorse or another manipulation, but either way, it left me shattered. Moving to a new city didn't erase the nightmares. The darkness I experienced left me forever changed, wary of the evil that can hide behind a friendly smile. I was 30 when I had to find a cheaper place to live, fast. My old apartment was way too expensive, and my savings were draining quicker than I liked. That's when I came across a listing for a room in a 3-bedroom house. The rent was so low, it felt like a scam. But I was desperate. The landlord, Mr. Thompson, didn't ask many questions. No background check, nothing. He just handed me the keys and said my roommate was a woman named Elizabeth, who worked nights and slept during the day. That seemed a bit weird, but I figured maybe he was just old-fashioned or really needed the money. The house was old too. The floors creaked with every step, and the wallpaper was faded and peeling at the edges. There was always a chill in the air, no matter how high I cranked the heat. Elizabeth's door stayed shut, and I never saw her. Not once. At first, I brushed it off. Maybe she was just shy or kept to herself. But as weeks went by, I started to feel watched. It was subtle at first, just that prickly feeling at the back of your neck when you're sure someone's eyes are on you. I tried to ignore it, blaming it on nerves from the move. But then little things started happening. I'd leave my keys on the kitchen counter and come back to find them on the dining table. The bathroom light would flicker for no reason, even after I replaced the bulb. My toothbrush, which I always left in a cup by the sink, would sometimes feel damp even when I hadn't used it. I told myself it was just stress. I'd been through a lot lately, right? Then one night, I came home late from work and noticed the front door was cracked open. My heart nearly stopped. I could have sworn I locked it that morning. I stepped inside slowly, every hair on my neck standing on end. The house was quiet. Too quiet. I went room to room, turning on every light, but nothing seemed out of place. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone had been there. That night, I lay in bed wide awake, the door locked tight. That's when I heard it, a soft humming. It was faint, almost like a lullaby, coming from the hallway. My heart pounded so hard I could barely breathe. I stayed under the covers, eyes squeezed shut, telling myself I was imagining things. Days turned into weeks, and the weirdness only got worse. Lights flickered more often. Shadows seemed to stretch too far across the floor. I was washing dishes one night when the kitchen light sputtered out, leaving me in darkness. In the dim glow from the street lamp outside, I saw a shadow move past the doorway. I flicked the switch desperately, and the light came back on, but the hallway was empty. I couldn't shake the feeling that someone, or something, was there with me. The worst night was a Friday. Exhausted from work, I crashed on the couch to watch TV, hoping a dumb sitcom would calm my nerves. The overhead light flickered and died, leaving only the TV's glow. And that's when I saw her. Elizabeth. Or at least I think it was her. She was standing in the hallway, face hidden in shadows, eyes dark and unblinking. She didn't move, didn't say a word. Just stood there, staring right at me. My voice came out barely above a whisper. "Elizabeth?" She didn't answer. Just turned slowly and disappeared down the hall without a sound. I bolted to my room, locked the door, and spent the rest of the night sitting against it with a knife from the kitchen clutched in my hand. Sleep wasn't an option. The next day, I called Mr. Thompson. He picked up on the first ring, his voice tense and tired, like he'd been waiting for my call. When I told him about Elizabeth, he paused for so long I thought the line had gone dead. "Just stay calm. I'll come by tomorrow," he finally said. But he never did. Desperate for answers, I did something stupid. I went into Elizabeth's room. The door creaked open slowly, and I almost hoped to find her asleep, some normal explanation for all of this. But the room was empty. Dust covered everything. The bed was made, the air stale, like no one had been in there for years. Old photos hung on the walls, a young woman smiling, arm around a much younger Mr. Thompson. My stomach dropped when I checked the date scrawled on the back of one picture, over 20 years ago. Heart pounding, I confronted Mr. Thompson. His face went pale when I mentioned the photos. Finally, he admitted the truth. Elizabeth was his sister who'd vanished without a trace 2 decades ago. He kept her room untouched out of guilt, or maybe just grief. But if she disappeared all those years ago, who or what had I seen standing in the hallway? I left that day, not even bothering to pack most of my things. I don't know what I saw, or if Mr. Thompson was hiding something worse. All I know is, when I drive past that house now, the curtains in Elizabeth's window always seem to move. Moving into that small city apartment was supposed to be a fresh start. My new roommate, Alex, was tall and thin, with eyes that always seemed to be looking at something just behind you. He didn't talk much, rarely left his room, and when he did, he moved so quietly I sometimes didn't hear him until he was right behind me. At first, I figured he was just shy. Maybe a little weird, but harmless. That changed fast. Whispers started late at night, low, frantic murmurs leaking through the walls. Sometimes I could almost make out words, but the language was strange, guttural. I told myself he was just watching weird movies or talking in his sleep. Then came the smell. It started faint, like something sour left out too long. But soon, it got so strong I had to keep my window open just to breathe. When I asked Alex about it, he just smiled, thin and stretched, and said he'd spilled something. But the smell never went away. One night, I couldn't take it anymore. I crept to his door, which was cracked open just enough for light to spill out. Candles flickered inside, casting shadows that twisted and crawled along the walls. Alex stood in the middle of the room, head bowed over an old book with pages yellowed and curling. His voice was low and steady, chanting words that seemed to make the air itself heavy. In the corner, something moved. A hunched shape, eyes glowing faintly. My heart slammed against my ribs, and I stumbled back, the floorboards creaking underfoot. The chanting stopped. I ran to my room, slammed the door, and didn't sleep a second that night. The next day, Alex was gone. His room was empty, the candles snuffed out. I should have felt relieved, but the apartment felt darker somehow. Then the scratching started, faint at first, inside the walls. I tried to tell myself it was just rats, but the noise grew louder, desperate, like something was trying to claw its way out. One night, as I tried to escape, Alex was there, blocking the door. His eyes were empty, skin pale. "You can't leave," he whispered. "You belong to us now." I pushed past him and ran, my breath tearing in my chest, never once looking back. Even now, I swear I can hear those whispers if I listen too closely at night.